This week on the Deer Society podcast, I'm joined by JJ Ducart, and we talk about Scrape Week. Scrapes can be one of the most effective ways to hunt in the weeks ahead, and we talk about all the different ways you can make scrapes and hunt scrapes.
The Deer Society podcast is brought to you by Illusion Hunting Systems, Onyx Hunt, Reveal Cellular Cameras, 10-Point Crossbows, Prime Archery, G5 Broadheads, Osseo Gear, Raw Frozen Scents, and HHA.
All right, so it is, I guess what you've coined now, Scrape Week. We are in the time of year where bucks are really starting to utilize, really utilizing scrapes now, becoming more and more active every day. We're getting closer and closer to that rut period. So I know a lot of our efforts are focused around scrapes now. JJ, what have you been seeing hunting on trail camera in relation to scrapes?
Yeah, scrapes are a big thing for us year round. We're getting bucks scraping from spring all the way through winter into spring, summer. It never ends, but this is that time of the year where new bucks are showing up. They're, laying down their scent. You can just see these big areas on the ground getting ripped up. I'm even seeing does hitting the scrapes too now, and it's a good strategy, not only for daylighting deer, because this is, the next 2 weeks probably the best chance to daylight a buck on a scrape, like when you had some pretty awesome encounters last year with that wide 9. Even your buck was hitting scrapes pretty regularly at that time too. So mid-October, late October, that's pretty much scrape week, scrape window. Time of the cold front, the right moon, can be just dynamite if you got a nice scrape inside the edge of could be inside corner, could be inside the timber. What do you think about scrapes out in the field too far? Do you think that's a little bit of a stretch to get them out there, or do you think being in timber stuff right now is a little better?
I think if you have a scrape, right now it's probably getting hit. When you say scrape outside, like on the outside of a field.
If you got to travel out in the open field.
Yeah, I think still, I think that could be, we're actually going to put a new one in tomorrow. We have this food plot that came in really good, and just still strategizing a little bit. It's a new farm on how to hunt it. And we're actually going to put a hodag licking stick out in the middle of that brassica plot. Just give them a spot where if they come into there, hopefully get them in bow range. I think any kind of communication tool that you're using right now, like scent communication, I guess, whether it's a hodag licking stick or a branch or, just a normal scrape or mock scrape that you've made, I think that they can be really active this time of year. Ones in the timber, I think, we see a lot of activity, or I do have been on my cameras recently, field edges, stuff like that. Those scrapes have been active now for quite a while. But the ones in the timber, I think, are really going to heat up. And I think we really only see a fraction of the scrapes that are out there. I can remember like the 80-10 buck that I shot in Minnesota a couple years back. We did that hunt breakdown on that deer. He had this main scrape, and he would come back and he would hit it every single year. Like, he didn't live on that property all year round, but like this time of year, he'd move right back in. That scrape would be active, and that's the one he was hitting. And right there's where I ultimately killed him. But when I ended up finding him, it was in that thick stuff a little ways away from there, just a few hundred yards. And man, there was scrapes everywhere in that thicker stuff, deeper in the timber. So I think, all the scrapes are getting more and more active right now.
Yeah, I was just in Wisconsin over the weekend, and it was warm. Did a little bit of hunting. One of the bucks I wanted to get eyes on did daylight. I did not see him, but he was on camera in daylight. But yeah, hitting scrapes. I kind of walked the property, drove around, figured it's a good time to set up cameras. I had all the raw scents out there, so the scrape scent, which is buck and doe, and then the multi-buck. Have not gotten into doe estrus scent quite yet. But a goal heading out of the weekend was to refresh all the batteries, new SD cards in the cameras, put them over the biggest scrapes I could find, and there was really 4 on the property that stood out. One was kind of a bottom. I know scent kind of gathers down in the bottoms. This is along a stretch of river, so a little bit of a bottom. Always the biggest primary scrape in the property where all the biggest bucks show up throughout the year. So I figured that was a good spot. Freshened it up. Actually had bucks fighting in the scrape that night that I freshened it up. So put that multi-buck scent from raw in there. Another one was, again, another big pinch point, which was, we call 7 corners. A lot of trails come through, which is, more, call them logging roads or, driving trails, recreational trails. They all kind of meet into one spot. That's always a big scrape. So freshen that one up, really tore it up. I had a little garden rake, a hand rake, and I just really tore up the ground. Didn't put any scent on the branches because it's urine, so I don't want to put it on the branches. Then another big one was on the edge of there's actually 2 I found, and I only put a camera on one because I didn't have enough cameras, but both were field edges. One's kind of an oak tree that hangs over the field, and there's always scrapes under those limbs where deer kind of enter that field at night. I figured that one was a little bit more nocturnal, so I didn't put the camera there. I chose to go where there's standing corn, kind of a little inside edge, and that scrape was tore up. It was fresh black powder, a lot of doe tracks. There were not a lot of bucks, but got a camera up on that one, fresh in that one too. So that's what I saw. Really out of you call it 100-acre stretch there. 4 big ones, 4 big scrapes that I put those cameras on, hoping that, over the next 2 weeks I get intel and I can jump over there and do some hunting as we get closer to November. So
Yeah, this is a great time to, really scout and use use the intel that you have if you're out there. If you see a big scrape or, a scrape that's recently freshened up, put a camera on it because, bucks are going to be using them coming up. And like you mentioned before, you can really catch them on daylight. I can remember back when I was a kid just learning to hunt, and through my teenage years before we were running cell cameras and all these things, like, this was always a great time because, a lot of times, like, I'd hunt with a climber, you go into a spot and, man, it's like, okay, fresh scrape, like, you're going to hunt there and you'd see a lot of bucks and especially a lot of daylight activity this time of year because they're using them. They're apparent to us as hunters. So, definitely a great time to be using them. I'll tell you, just the other day, I was out and had to change some batteries in the camera, and there was a drainage that kind of runs up between 2 standing cornfields, and it's kind of open. There's some grass, and there's one kind of big tree line that runs up through there, and was just doing a little inventory there. I slipped down there and looked, and I thought, man, this is a perfect corridor, like perfect spot for a scrape. And, I roughed up the ground there, cleared it out, made some black dirt, and there were some overhanging branches, and I thought, man, they were just a little high, and I was unprepared. Like, I didn't have anything to cut anything, or like, I could see deer being able to use it, but they might have to jump on their hind legs a little bit. But it was just like that perfect spot. So I didn't want to have to go back in there. So like on that kind of same tree, but around the corner, there was a vine that was kind of hanging down. And I'm like, well, I bet I can pull that vine down. Well, sure enough, I pulled the vine down, but the whole thing came down. So I'm like, man, what do I do now? But the vine was laying on the ground, and I looped it back up and I threw it up there, and I got it stuck in between some branches, and it hung down at the perfect height, and put a camera on there. And sure enough, that night, like, there was 4 different bucks that hit it. And just being creative like that, I think, using whatever you can to your advantage, whether it's something that you already have in place or looking for those spots where you can create a mock scrape. Great time to do it right now.
Yeah, of those 4 spots in Wisconsin, actually 2 of them had vines along with branches. So it's like, well, if I could, they're just natural grapevines out there or whatever you want to call them. Figured, well, I'll give them 2 options. So there'd be a vine hanging down, and a few months back, I'd cut it off about chest high and just let it kind of hang in there with the scrape. And some bucks, you can see a scrape under the vine, you can see a scrape under the branch, and you just kind of let them choose what they want. But yeah, those are always good. Yeah, you can, then there's a lot of ways to make your own scrapes. I know some spots right now that I'm trying to get some intel, the branches are super brittle, so the bucks just keep breaking them higher and higher and higher. So it's at a point where the deer can't reach it. So if I can get a free day this week, we'll see. Got to go freshen them up. Actually, one thing I did this year that was kind of cool is I cut off a tip of a branch on a white oak so they hold their leaves pretty well. And it was a V. So it was like a V-shaped branch, had some decent length on it, 2-3 feet. And I kind of just put it over another branch that was too high and just let it drape over like a teepee. Tied it up with a little bit of string, and that's been holding strong, and the bucks are hitting that. So I think between that adding a rope, which could be hit or miss. And then a vine. Those are three pretty good options for sprucing up a scrape and making it a good visual for bucks to key in on.
Yeah, I think, like we talked to a little bit earlier, I said I was going to put that licking stick in. I think that, especially if you're hunting in an open area, I know that Donnie Monroe, we just broke down a hunt. There's that gusher hunt. He does this a lot in Kansas where you're hunting these big open areas. And it's like, okay, what's going to get these deer into bow range? You got a big food plot, whatever it is, big field. Putting a licking stick or something, a pole, with an overhanging branch out in the middle of the food plot that you can shoot to. So 20 yards away, whatever that is. It gives them a visual, it gives them that scent communication tool. And I've seen that work time and time again. If you don't have somewhere that like is obvious to put a scrape along a tree line or something, putting it out there in the middle, can be really, really effective. There's a few different ways that we do that. One is the Hodag licking stick, which works really well. I've seen other guys just use like a pole that they put out there, whether it's even a T-post with a mount on top of it and put a branch in there, or a cedar rubbing post and then they drill a branch into there. Can be very, very effective in the open.
Yeah, I've never, we've only done it a couple of times, but have not put a lot of the posts out in the field. Had a lot of good luck with that licking branch system by Hodag, though, where it's a spring system and you just create your own licking branch. I wish I had one of those this weekend. Actually, there was a spot with no low branches and a nice water hole, but I got the camera on water. I wish I would have paired it with a scrape, just, more traction in one spot. Another thing I'm thinking about as we head into scrape week is if we can get a little bit of rain coming up. That's really going to activate those scrapes. Leaves are falling, so the bucks are consistently trying to open those back up. Leaves are falling really hard and fast right now, covering up these scrapes. So we get a little bit of moisture, activate that scent. If you can use scent, I know that raw scent, that multi-buck's huge. I've used that probably 5 years now over in Wisconsin. I had good luck with it. There's a lot of other scents that work pretty well too, but I like it fresh, as fresh as possible. And if we do get that rain, which we potentially have some rain on Friday, I think it's Friday, Saturday.
Yeah.
And then into next week, that rain will activate those scrapes. Those bucks will be out moving. That'll probably be the best window in the next 10 days for bucks to be on their feet. If we get a little bit of cold front, I don't know what the moon is next week, but if we get that moisture that's predicted a couple days, I think that's going to be a big time kill window. And it's lining up basically with when you shot your buck last year. So
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of good things coming. It's been kind of a, hit or miss season, I guess, for guys as a whole, especially on our team. We've had a few encounters, but really haven't been hunting too much, just because the weather's been warm, waiting for those windows to kind of line up. We got some serious windows that are coming, especially with the time of year. When it comes to scrapes and hunting scrapes, what are your thoughts there? You hear a lot of guys talk about, well, hunt downwind of the scrape. Because that's where the bucks are going to go. They're going to go downwind and circle the scrape and check to see if a doe hit it. What are your thoughts on that versus hunting over the scrape?
I guess my opinion is just hunt the scrape and not downwind of it. I think the downwind thing could work pretty well during the rut, maybe a little bit more, like downwind of bedding areas, maybe downwind of scrapes, but I think just hunting right on top of those scrape lines, 20, 30 yards off, play the wind. I think that's the key for me.
Yeah, I know.
Opinion.
I agree. I've always heard, I guess, guys talk about hunting downwind of the scrape because bucks will work downwind of them. But, I have very seldomly, if ever, seen, like, if a buck's going to come to a scrape, like, he's going to come to the scrape because he wants to work it. He wants to leave his scent there. Not only does he want to check it, but he's going to come in, he's going to lay his scent there. He's going to work it. So, not saying throw that out the window as a myth, but if it were me and I had any advice for you, it'd be hunt close to that scrape, be able to shoot where that deer is when he's at that scrape, because I think more times than not, he's going to hit it.
Yeah, I think my favorite scrape hunt, it's a hunt breakdown called The Perfect Storm. That was before maybe even we started working together back in 2015, 13, can't remember the year. But it was a cool setup on a property we used to have permission on. It was kind of a horseshoe, and it was recreational trail, whatever you want to call it, where it's, people drive ATVs on it, tractors. A lot of neighbors were riding horses on it and stuff. But basically a looped system of a trail where you could see there were overhanging branches because it's not maintained. And every overhanging branch was opened up weeks, probably early October to mid-October, really started opening up all those scrapes. We knew of a pretty good, what we think was a 4-year-old buck without history, didn't know, using this area. And we got in, actually my dad filmed this one. We sat in the truck. It was a big storm system coming through that morning. We actually sat in the truck, watched the radar. It got poured on in the truck, stayed dry. And then we just raced out, and it wasn't that far, 100 yards to the stand. So pretty much we're ready right when that rain quit, jumped out, got in the tree, light sprinkle, rain kind of moved off, started to get light. And then not too long after that, you see this buck come in, do the big shake, get all that moisture off his back. And he was just pretty much coming in to check all those scrapes, open them back up. And before he got to that last scrape at, 15 yards, put a pretty good shot on him, and he was down. So that's like the ideal scrape situation, in my opinion. If you can get on one of those systems where there's just all those scrapes, they get covered with leaves, or you have that moisture come through, bucks will be, it depends on how that lines up with the daylight. Like if that happens at night, obviously that's opportunity missed from a hunting perspective. But if you can get that weather to hit during the day, cold front, a little bit of rain, be out there right after that rain, those bucks will be checking on those scrapes, and that's what we're looking for.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like the hair's almost standing up in my arms and I've talked about sounds before and hearing a big buck walk through the woods, but it's that time of year where I can almost hear that right now. It's like a buck walking through the woods, and then he get into a scrape, and just the sounds he makes as he's breaking those leaves out of the scrape and clearing it out. It's just this epic kind of sound. Looking forward to that big time. Scrape week, man. It's about here.
And that hunt was a quiet one. So I actually heard some squirrels chirping, which means something could be coming. It could be a cat or a raccoon, or a lot of times it's a big buck or a deer. Squirrels are barking. Look over there. Here comes the rack. So nice and quiet. Would never heard him walk in, but because of all the rain we just had. But yeah, waiting on that crisp.
Yeah, I think, one of the cool things now too is like deer are shifting right now. They're moving. It seems like new bucks are showing up pretty regularly. They're moving around, getting more towards their kind of rut territories, and that'll continue now throughout the next, several weeks. But scrapes are a great place to find those new bucks for the first time. That's where they'll show up. They're getting in there again. Scent is king, like the communication aspect for deer and scent. You'll find them at those scrapes. So, if you can put your cameras anywhere right now, scrapes are a really, really good option to give you intel, and then just inventory the new bucks that are coming through. We're getting to a point where, in these next week to 2 weeks, I think those bigger bucks will start to daylight. They're going to work those scrapes, once a day, or for sure once every couple days to clear them and check them. So, king when it comes to hunting right now, and, camera inventory, I think.
Yeah, and it seems like a lot of these spots, especially when it's a big primary scrape down in the bottom, it's right in the evening when those bucks are using that spot, and the thermals start to play games a little bit. So pay attention to thermals and how that's going to be affected in the evening and starting to pull downhill, even if you think you have the right wind. A lot of those scrapes are in kind of a scent gathering hub. So, great scent control with your phase system, be on point with that. Ground scent walking in big, make sure you have a nice trail going in, be downwind of the scrape, be ready for those thermals to kick in, because on a light day, they kick in way more than you'd like sometimes. So understand that. We're constantly out there throwing wind floaters, wind swirling quite a bit. Just try to find a really good spot where you're not getting scented too often, or the deer are not downwind of you too often, even with thermals kind of playing games. So, that's a big thing too. I mean, you're going to get 1 or 2 cracks here coming up, and don't want to mess it up, because then it's going to be rut. And then, all scrapes kind of will be out the window here in 2-3 weeks.
Yeah.
So nice, big, strong push here on scrape week, maybe 2 weeks from now. And be cautious, but be aggressive.
Yeah, the good thing about scrapes too is like, if you get those cameras in place now, if they're not already there, we'll get into this point where they can be really effective. And then, as you mentioned, like throughout the rut, they'll kind of go dead for a while because those bucks are off. They're chasing does. They're actively searching. They'll come back and hit those scrapes and check them, between does. But like once then we get through the rut, those scrapes will really become active again for a period. Like, as the peak rut kind of slows down, like those bucks will come in and check those scrapes looking for those last does in. So a lot of success, a lot of new bucks that we've had, and we can do a podcast later about this, but I've had a lot of success finding new bucks on scrapes after the peak part of the rut.
Yep. Yeah, I would say around here, let me know what you think about this. Scrapes are pretty effective in that first couple days in November, but then it feels like that November 5th, it could even be earlier, it could be later. It seems like they really dry up fast and the leaves start to, cover them up. They're not checking them. They're more on doe trails, nose down, once you get into November for a couple weeks there. I don't know if it's November. It seems like 3rd, 5th.
Yeah.
Scrapes kind of die off a little bit here.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say that's probably pretty accurate. Yeah. But then I feel like there's a point where, it's a couple weeks after that probably. I feel like some of those scrapes, you start to see them open up again. You start seeing a little more activity on there. And I think that's just bucks are looking for those last does.
10th through the 14th.
Yeah. Even later, I think, I think that activity increases like that 20, even around that 20th of October, 20th of November time frame. Still seeing some good activity on scrapes again, before we get into that really late season winter food push here in the Midwest.
Yeah, and along with scrapes too right now, a lot of guys have been texting me like, can't wait till next week and bust out the black rack. So really communication is going to be strong here these next 2 weeks too. There's going to be a lot of bucks fighting, laying down scent, making new scrapes. You see them bristled up all the time. So communication is going to be big. This will probably be the best chance to rattle in a buck would be that last week in October. So keep that in mind. I did a little bit of rattling the other day, just light, kind of in the evening. Again, we weren't quite into this late October yet, just some light sparring and had some deer react to it. And actually does came into it and then started feeding right in front of me. So they're starting to be intrigued with that. I think you can get more aggressive here coming up and just be careful. Try not to rattle too close to bedding or try to spook deer, but it definitely can be a big tool coming up these next couple weeks too.
Yeah, for sure. And that it's like that last week of October is that golden week. Like if I can just, especially like in a morning, evening, whatever, but like mornings, it gets light, you let things calm down a
Frosty,
little bit.
calm.
And you rattle, and man, I've had so many times where you just rattle in, multiple bucks at one time. And it's like, when all things line up like that, it's like the perfect storm again. But that last week of October is key to have your communication tools, your black rack and your extinguisher, hands down the best week, in my opinion, to be able to call a big buck in.
Yep. Yeah, so be ready to communicate. We got an Art of Deer Calling series out there. There's all kinds of instructional videos too for different vocalizations, when to use them, how to use them. So that's a big asset. And then I'm still going to do one more day where it's probably 2 more days where it's this week, checking scrapes, trying to find the biggest scrapes, getting cameras on them and trying to maybe even hang some stands too, to kind of react or be on top of the freshest intel. So there's a little bit of time left to do that, but for the most part, hopefully you're kind of ready and get ready for scrape week. And then the rut will be here.
Yeah. What other things are you looking for when you're out there right now? Or like what other features are you focused on outside of scrapes this time of year?
I mean, water holes are always huge, but I know where most of those are already on the properties I hunt. So really looking for scrapes, big trails. If something changed from last year from a food standpoint, checking where the deer are kind of walking through the area, big rubs. But I really like scrapes. If I can find one of them giant scrapes, primary scrapes, it's where I'm going to focus a lot of time the next 7 to 10, maybe up to 14 days.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a That's a pretty good strategy right now too, is get your camera set, get everything ready, and then, get as much intel as you can, wait for the windows, go hunt during those windows, hunt your scrapes. But then too, watch that intel, and if a new buck shows up in an area, get ready to jump. Like I love that this time of year. Like I'll watch a lot. My cameras wait for a big buck to kind of move in and just be super ready. So when he does that and there's a window that lines up, like boom, get in there, be aggressive, and now's a great time to kill him in daylight hours.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, use some of these warm weather, windy days to kind of set up if you got a new set. Try to keep your scent down again. Stay clean, shower beforehand, keep your clothes clean. So when he does come in there for the first time, it's not too big a change. Be ready to make moves, and hopefully your bow's dialed in.
yeah, make sure you
Shoot that bow.
get out and practice for sure.
Yeah, practice up.
For sure.
What else we got? Scrape wise.
Scrape wise, I think we covered a lot of scrape. I think when it comes down to it, there's just so many different ways that you can approach scrapes, and the way you utilize natural scrapes versus creating mock scrapes. And I think that there's no good, in my opinion, there's no good like rule of thumb, like this is what you do every single place. I think they're all different. The way that I hunt, and this is just a preference thing, like I like to be as natural as I can in an area. So like if there's a scrape that's already there, like I'm going to let it be. I'm not going to go in there and try to create a mock scrape or do too much to it, because I know the deer are already going to use it. And I think that's effective. And I think there's other circumstances where you can create scrapes that are more effective for you as a hunter, So I don't think there's a rule of thumb. There's so many different things that you can do. Licking stick, licking branch, rope, just a normal mock scrape I think works great too. Scratching up some ground with whatever you got on a branch that's low enough for a deer to communicate with. I think just opening up that ground is a big attractant for these deer. Like all you need is one deer to go in there and sniff around and pee in it or lick the branch, and boom, you're off and running. Like it's just, you need that little spark, and so many different ways you can do it. But just can't say enough how crucial they are this time of year to hunt over.
Yeah, and I like the fact that you said keep it natural. I know sometimes we put out some hemp ropes and stuff, and early season, it seems like they work well if you can get them seasoned heading into the season. Weathered, we'll call it weathered. So all that scent is kind of out of the rope, whether it's oils or other things. And then it turns into more of a natural situation. But if you try to put something like that out right now, sometimes it could be hit or miss just because it's so foreign to the deer if they're not used to that. Yeah. So I think a branch would be better in that case if your deer are not used to seeing ropes hanging from the sky all over the place. Also, one thing I did in Wisconsin this year, so I had a primary scrape a couple of years ago that did really well. The branch ended up getting pulled down. Transitioned that into a rope last year. Did not have as good a success on the rope. Some bucks liked it, some didn't. This year I tied branches in with the rope, so it's like a rope with branches kind of woven into it. Looks more natural. Still kind of strange when you see a string with a bunch of stuff hanging on the bottom of it, but that seems to be doing a lot better than just the rope did. So yeah, keep it natural. I mean, especially I was wearing latex gloves the other day to keep that scent off my hands, especially when I'm going back and forth from camera to scent. I don't want the cameras to smell like scent because then the deer check those out and kind of key in on that. So I want them to be focused on the scrape, all the scent there. Cameras are scent free. And then, if you're going to put that licking stick tomorrow or whatever you choose to do, I feel like, even gloves in that case would be a pretty good situation too, because he'll be trying to hunt that in the next couple days, weeks. Don't want to lay down too much human odor. Yeah.
So I'll run a scenario by you. And I don't know if this on social media or what, I saw it the other day, but a guy had a picture. This is big kind of scrape. It was actually a fallen tree. But it had big, tall branches, and there was obviously a scrape that it created, and there's a bunch of deer activity using it, and there's a pretty good buck that came in there, and one that he had said that obviously he wants to shoot. And it came in there that night before, and he had posted, he's like, he was going to run in there that next day And this deer worked the scrape. He's gonna run in the next day. He's like, I gotta freshen that scrape because I'm gonna hunt it in the next, coming days. What are your thoughts on that? Is that something that you would have done, or would you have left it alone?
I would have just left it alone, but I'm more of a natural hunter, try to be more sneaky, not really disturb stuff once we get into the season. I try to do that all preseason.
Yeah.
And if the buck's already using it, just let him keep on the pattern. So I probably would not have touched it unless it's something super easy, like you could drive to it and he's not bedded anywhere near, or you could walk in real simple, easy, maybe spray a teeny bit of scent, like I really like the raw multi-buck. That, like I said, we had some bucks fighting right over that scrape right after I put them out. So, I mean, could potentially do something like that, but I don't think you need to.
Let me ask you this. There's always that concept of like, oh, I'm going to go in and do that because then he's going to think there's another buck there and it's going to piss him off. And what do you think about that? Do you think that there's benefit in doing that? Do you think you can create that illusion with scent? And if so, do you think that outweighs the odds of potentially doing more harm than good?
I think that's a loaded question. I'm not sure. Obviously, I just did up the multi-buck and all my scrapes in Wisconsin, but I didn't have a target buck to really worry about. So I'm just thinking, if a new buck shows up and he smells that, then his mindset is, oh, there's a lot of action here. There's some doe scent, buck scent, all kinds of stuff going on. If I had a target that was using it consistently and then you threw in some extra buck lure on top of that, I'd be a little bit more skeptical.
Yeah.
Just don't want to throw him off. He pretty much knows all the other bucks in the area for the most part. Again, I really like something really fresh and raw, not sitting on the shelf at the store, or something that's got preservatives and things in there. So, I mean, you could test it. I don't really know what deer thinks, so I guess I don't have a good answer, but not afraid of it, but also don't want to spook them off either.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think I would have stayed out of there probably. I would have let that, understanding that buck is now there. He's laid his scent down. He understands the scent that's there. Probably would have stayed out of there. Now, going in there, like if I'm going by it or when I leave, like maybe that's a good time to freshen it up if you're going to do that. But again, if you get a scrape that a big buck hits, and like, especially if he comes in there and he really trashes it up and hits it, and like, go in there, be careful, do as minimal intrusion things as you can, because he will be back there. Like, chances are good that he'll be back there. So
yeah, you don't want to pick up on the human odor when you're just trying to lay down deer scent, because that's going to ruin your hunt quicker than the deer scent will make your hunt probably.
Yeah, risk reward. Obviously
If you had a slingshot and you had little scent capsules and you could flick one down there.
Yeah, maybe that's a
little paintball full of scent.
Maybe that's a new thing for Reveal. They have a little like thing on their cameras that you can press a button, send it to the app, and send some scent out there to your scrape. But well, I think there's a lot there on scrapes. I think we've established that they're pretty important and a pretty good asset to a hunter this time of year. Also focusing on things like water holes. If you planted your food plots this summer, we're getting to a point now where we're getting those freezing temperatures. They're getting more and more palatable to these deer. So I'm seeing more deer every day go to the primetime plots, for example. There's another area. Does are stacking up in there where the buck's going to be here as we get closer to the rut. They're going to be where the does are. So if you can match a lot of those things up, I know you talk about sweeteners, what are spot sweeteners, food, water, scrapes, as many of those things as you can kind of stack together right now, I think you can put the odds more in your favor.
Yeah, like crabapple tree we have on a couple of our plots right now are getting hammered, not only because the crabapples hang out longer, so they're still up in the top of the tree. They're dropping every day or two. A couple more apples, so those deer are checking for those, but then they make scrapes under that whole tree along that perimeter, so kind of doubles as a scrape food source, keeps a good consistent pattern going. One question for you. When would you, so I was using scrape lure, which is doe and buck. was using some multi-buck as kind of more of a challenge scent. When would you personally start using doe and estrus? Because it seemed a little bit early on October 19th when I put it out. It seemed a little bit early for that. It was like 80, it's warm.
Yeah.
But we're closing in. Like when would you add that to the mix?
Personally, I'd wait maybe a little bit, and I think it's dependent on how many deer you're seeing using that scrape too. Because I think what I would want to do is if there's a lot of deer using it, I want those deer to continue to use it, especially those does, right? So like I wouldn't want to add like a doe and heat or doe estrus in there too early with the chance of spooking some of those does that I want they're continuing to use a scrape. Not saying that would spook the does, but also I think that, that doe estrus close to when I'm going to start hunting. So like, if I'm planning on hunting in the next, couple days, then I would maybe do that. Like if I was going in to hunt, I wouldn't probably go in there and do it before I was going to hunt. If I would pick a day, say, okay, I'm going to go in there, I'm going to put the doe estrus in there, I'm going to hunt, and then, probably plan on hunting there after that. So we're getting close to that time, but I think, towards that last week of October is a good time to do that.
Are you using any cover scents? I know when I hunt Wisconsin and we can use raw frozen scents, sometimes I'll have an empty bottle, I'll freshen up the scrapes midday or something, go out for an evening hunt, and I'll just take that bottle and hang it up on a branch and kind of let it air out as kind of a cover scent. You ever do anything like that? Spray a little bit?
Typically I don't. I used to quite a bit. Hunting down in Kansas, Oklahoma, I will use raw, and we'll try to use some cover scent stuff, and I think it works great. Obviously, we can't use it here in Minnesota, but I think that again, when it comes to it, I'm more of a minimalist. Like I try to put the least amount of scent out there that I can. Now, back in the day, growing up hunting as a teenager, I used a lot of scent and had a lot of good success with it. Maybe it's because we hunt the majority of the time here in Minnesota and we can't use it. I've just got away from using it. I think it can be super effective if you use it at the right time and in the right way. I think a lot of it has to do with, again, like being fresh, being non-spookish to these deer. I think a lot of those scents that are advertised and you buy on the shelf, I think they can do more harm than good, and have proven that a lot, just in my own experience, I guess. But don't do a ton for cover scent, but occasionally here and there.
Yeah, it kind of goes hand in hand with having drags or dragging scent where you're walking to. I try not to do that so much. Just make the scrape not have any scent where your boots are, so then they don't want to follow you or try to pick up on something. Just try to be as clean as possible. Make those mock scrapes or add scent to those scrapes. Get out of there or get to your stand and just try to be something that's not getting picked up by deer. So yeah, used to do a lot of scent drags in the past. Haven't done it recently. Well, we just can't use it in Minnesota, so it's hunting out of state. Only so many weeks a year that we get to test this stuff out. Just haven't really done that, but I would be curious to try that sometime again, to do a drag if my boots are extremely clean, if I have a good trail in and out, and I know I'm not going to bump deer, like do a little drag, freshen up a scrape, like your buddy that asked you that question. That'd be a good little experiment if you could, do a little drag heading in there, freshen that scrape, drag it out, and then somehow access your stand a different way, completely scent free, not getting that scent on your boots, just using a string or a drag rope. That'd be interesting to see if those deer actually follow that or if they just don't care and go right to the scrape. Yeah. Because I've seen it both ways where they pick it up and wonder, or they just completely don't, just ignore it. Yeah. Altogether. But
yeah, I guess we'll have to do some experimenting. It's the funny thing is I try to access my spots where I'm hoping deer don't go or aren't there. You know what I mean? So how effective is that if you're dragging it through a spot that you don't think they're going to be and you don't want them there anyway? So it's kind of a hard thing to do. But if you're going a long ways, maybe you're hunting public or something and got a long ways to walk and it makes sense to do a drag, try it. I've seen it work in the past, and but again, make sure that your stuff, your boots, your pants are super, super clean because you don't want to mix that human odor with the scent that you're putting out.
Yeah, and just a little quick hit on boots. I'm wearing rubber boots, washed them with Phase many weeks ago. They've been aired outside as much as possible, washed them with a hose, with water, walking through creeks, mud, leaves, grass. So getting them nice and scent-free. They've been aged for multiple years out in the field. Don't really store them in my house, so got extremely clean boots. So something like that, I could see getting away with it if the trail is okay or if you're walking out in a field. But if you do have like a brand new pair of boots, or you're not wearing rubber boots and it's some leather boots or something with absorbing some odor, I'd maybe be a little bit more cautious. But I feel comfortable and confident with my boots. But yeah, another factor too, you just don't want them picking up on your boots.
Yeah.
You're trying to drag.
Yeah.
A lot of people put scent on their boots. I don't know, not my thing, just because then it's there forever.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And then, I've hunted with guys that put it on their boots or put it somewhere, and then you sit there and you smell the scent on your boots the whole time. And like, I don't want that scent coming from exactly where I'm at. You want it coming from the scrape or coming from that trail that you drug it on. So, yeah, I guess I can't say that it completely doesn't work, because I'm seeing a lot of different scenarios work really, really well. I think there's not a one size fits model when it comes to anything hunting. But again, whatever you're going to do, I think just be cautious with it. Make sure you're thinking about all the aspects of your scent control. Use the Phase system, and don't be afraid to get a little aggressive this time of year, but also be as natural as you can while you're doing it.
So yeah, in summary, scrape week coming up, top spots, following rivers, bottoms, logging roads are huge. Inside corners on some ag fields would be big, especially corn. It kind of pinches them off into those edges, and all those overhanging branches turn into scrapes. If you can get out and find some of those big spots where they're opened up the size of a truck hood, car hood, and you can get a good stand within 20, 30 yards, play the wind, sneak in. That's kind of where you want to be this time of the year. And also calling is going to be real big coming into the pre-rut, and decoys, also another big strategy. So all the fun tactics coming up should be in play, and should be an exciting time.
We wait all year for the few weeks ahead. So get excited. Good luck out there. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Scrape week. Enjoy it. Send us pictures. If you haven't done so already and you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, download the Deer Society app. It's free. Follow us on social media, and send us your pictures. We look forward to it. Lots of hunt breakdowns, art of calling, tons of information out there right now on the Deer Society YouTube channel to help you be more successful in the coming weeks. So check that out, and we'll catch you next time.
The Deer Society podcast is brought to you by Illusion Hunting Systems, Onyx Hunt, Reveal Cellular Cameras, 10-Point Crossbows, Prime Archery, G5 Broadheads, Osseo Gear, Raw Frozen Scents, and HHA.